Welcome back, fellow creators. So, what do you do when you're literally going through hell? You've had maybe a recent breakup, you've had something go wrong with your health, just don't know why. Maybe you're having financial troubles, and it just feels like the world is crashing down on you. Like nothing is going right. And no matter what you do, you just can't get back on track. How do we address this? What do we do when our world's falling down on us? Well, here's Dr. Joe Dispenza to share his story and how he overcame literally going through hell.
Well, I think for some of us to wake up, we need a wake-up call. And in 1986, I got the call. I was in a triathlon in Palm Springs, California. And I was on the biking portion of the race, and I was making a turn, and there was a police officer on the corner, and he was pointing to me to make the turn, but he had his back to the oncoming traffic. So I was passing two cyclists on the corner, and when I made the turn, a four-wheel drive vehicle going pretty fast catapulted me out of my bike. When I landed, I broke 6 vertebrae in my spine. And when you land in a vertical position, the compressive force takes the columns of the vertebrae and flattens them. So I had compressed 6 vertebrae. But when you compress those vertebrae, the volume of that mass has to go somewhere, and it went back against my spinal cord. When my body landed, it kind of whipped forward, and the top vertebrae out of the 6 that were broken was more than 60% collapsed, and the arch that the spinal cord passed through had broken like a pretzel. I mean, there's an elaborate story that goes along with it. I mean, just I had one side of my body was complete road rash. I mean, when I woke up the next morning from the injury, I was stuck to the sheets. My whole body they had to come with spray bottles and spray the sheets and slowly peel them off me. And I had gravel all in it was pretty crazy. But I never had any anger at all. I mean, because I knew that on some level that this was my initiation, and in order for us to be initiated, we have to be challenged. And I had 4 opinions from 4 leading surgeons in Southern California, and the typical surgery for that type of injury is called a Harrington rod surgery, and they do a complete laminectomy of the back parts of your vertebrae, and they cut them all, the back parts off. And then they screw in these long stainless steel rods. And in my case, it was from the base of my neck to the base of my spine. They were going to fuse my entire spine to try to cantilever and pull the bone fragments off the cord and open up room for the spinal cord to flow up and down to the body. And I think if it was anybody else that I had seen an X-ray for, or a CAT scan or MRI, I probably would have recommended the Harrington rod surgery, but this was me. I wasn't so quick to make that decision because I thought that I would be spending the rest of my life in pain, or at least on medications, or partially handicapped. I decided against the surgery, and of course when you go against convention like that, you're always considered foolhardy and insane. But I was willing to weigh what I knew as in my studies against what I didn't know, and I was willing to take a chance and see if I could heal myself without having any surgical intervention. Of course, they thought I had post-traumatic stress disorder, I hit my head, and that I was not making any sense, or I wasn't being reasonable. But I just had this thought, I'm not going anywhere, I'm not doing anything, I'm laying face down, and I just thought, the power that made the body heals the body. And this vitalistic intelligence that's giving us life on a moment-to-moment basis is a consciousness, and consciousness is an awareness, and awareness is paying attention. It's an intelligence, and it has an amazing will, it has an unlimited mind, and it's loving us in the life. And I thought, well, if my will could match its will, if my mind could match its mind, and my love for life could match its love for life, maybe I could make contact with it, give it a plan, give it a template, give it a design. And when I was happy with that design, I knew that I couldn't do the healing, so I would surrender my creation to a greater mind and just see what the autonomic nervous system could do. So it sounds really easy, but I think that when we're in crisis or trauma, we tend to focus on what we don't want to have happen instead of what we do want to have happen. So I made a deal with myself that I was going to reconstruct my entire spine, and I wasn't going to let any thought slip by my awareness that I didn't want to experience. And so I went through about 6 or 7 weeks of total hell because I couldn't get my mind to do what I wanted it to do. I'd start off reconstructing the vertebrae in my spine, and then the next thing you know, I'd be thinking about living the rest of my life in a wheelchair. And I'd become conscious that I was focusing on what I didn't want to have happen instead of what I did want to have happen. Then I'd start from the very beginning again, and I'd reconstruct my spine, and then I'd be thinking about, should I sell my home, should I sell my practice, and all the people in my life were telling me to sell everything. But if I accepted the belief on some level that I would be able to walk again, I should never sell my home and sell my practice. And so no one could relate with me, and I think that's the beginning of the dark night of the soul, when nobody gets you but you, and you're crossing a river of change, and you're weighing what you know against what you don't know, and you realize nobody has the answers but you. In those 6 weeks, it would take me 2.5 hours to reconstruct my spine, and at the end of about 6 weeks, beginning of the 7th week, I went through the entire process without losing my focus, and it was like hitting a tennis ball in a sweet spot. Something clicked for me. And from that point on, everything got easier. I was able to do what I was doing in 2.5 hours in 45 minutes. Little did I know that I was firing and wiring circuits in my brain, and at the same time I was increasing my ability to pay attention and stay present. And so when I started noticing those strong changes in my body, the numbness went away, the pain went away, I started having more motor function, I started to correlate what I was doing inside of me with the effects I was producing outside of me. And the moment I was able to correlate that connection, I did it with more passion, more sincerity, more enthusiasm, instead of dreading going through the process. And that was the switch for me, because from that moment on, my body started to respond to my mind very quickly. They told me that I'd probably never walk again. They told me that I would have to live in a body cast for a year, and that I'd be handicapped in some way. And was back on my feet in a little less than 10 weeks. I was back training 12 weeks. To this day, I really have no pain in my spine, and I just made a deal with myself in those lonely nights, And I'm so glad that it happened, because I would never be where I am today or doing what I'm doing. And it also created a level of humility and understanding for me that I think that I needed at the time. And it just changed me. And the challenge is, of course, after you're initiated like that, you step back into your life and you can't relate with anybody anymore. You mean, what was I going to be unhappy about? I mean, I duff a golf shot, and I was like, beautiful day. I mean, I just happy to be alive and standing up. So, in a sense, that sparked an interest in something else. I wanted to know what happened to me. I wanted to know if anybody else understood this. I wanted to know the science behind it, and in no science could I find the explanation in the old models of science. I had to start looking at the quantum model of reality. I had to start looking at epigenetics. I had to start looking at neuroplasticity, psychoneuroimmunology, neuroendocrinology. I had to piece together a model of understanding, and at the same time, it stopped me enough to ask bigger questions like, who am I? What am I doing here? What's my purpose in life? What happens when we die? Is it really about success? What is it about? And that started my inward journey in asking those big questions. I think that you have to open up doors of possibility and look to see for answers that aren't based in tradition or religion or culture. I think that those languages are dated, and I think science is the contemporary language of mysticism. I think science is what demystifies the mystical. And all of those new sciences point the finger at possibility, and I understand now how it happened. And so what happened after that, I retreated from my life. I left Southern California, I moved to the Pacific Northwest, and I just disconnected, sold everything, sold my practice, and really just started to study. and really try to piece it together. And then I got interested in spontaneous remissions, and I started saying, well, anybody else have these conditions? And so I traveled to 17 different countries and interviewed hundreds and hundreds of people that were diagnosed with a medical condition. They were treating conventionally or unconventionally. They were staying the same or getting worse, and all of a sudden they got better. And I wanted to know what the cause was that produced that effect. And so I assembled 4 basic principles which stood right in alignment with what happened to me, and wrote a book. That book kind of was the science of changing your mind and how this all happens, and kind of gave the principles of those 4 specific relative commonalities. But then the next part of me was like, okay, well, I understand now that it happens to people, and they weren't mystics, they weren't spiritual, some of them, ate meat. I mean, they were just all smoked cigarettes. There was just no commonality other than the fact that there was an element of mind involved in it. So I thought, if I know the principles, it happened to me, and these people have similar understandings, can I reproduce it? And so that's when I started to teach the practical aspect and to see if we were able to reproduce those changes. And I think for the first year, we didn't see many changes. And I don't know if I wasn't saying it well enough, or it just was just the consciousness at the time. But after that first year, people started to lock in and start really applying it. And I have to say that common people are doing the uncommon. And I thought, if I'm ever able to walk again, I promise myself that I'll spend the rest of my life studying the mind-body connection and mind over matter, and that's what I've been doing since 1986.
Welcome back, fellow creators. So I hope whatever troubles you're going through, you're able to see a way past them now. As Dr. Joe Dispenza shared his story about restoring functionality to his back and getting his spine to work again, made me realize something. That we all go through different trials and tribulations in life. And while some of them are very, very tough and it's hard to see why they happened, sometimes we just don't understand and we're rattled with grief and anger. Sometimes you can take that as a learning experience. You can take that as a chance to grow. And while your mind doesn't necessarily want to work with you at that point, it just wants to feel anger, sorrow, rage, wants to feel all these emotions. It's time to take a deep breath. And while you're going through that, have your mind work for you, as he was able to heal his spine using his mind. I know it's tough, but you sit down, you do the meditation, or you let go. And you allow yourself to create a new you, as we've talked about before, through an elevated emotion and a clear intention. You see that wound being healed and that disease being gone. You see that amount of money you want. You see yourself overcoming that obstacle. And you do that every day consistently. You make your mind work for you. And then you can literally get through the toughest things you can get through hell. So be sure to subscribe, hit the notification bell, like this video, and leave me a comment below.